Out in the bush, west of Brisbane, a farmer, clearing land in 1987, hit something with his bulldozer that he could not explain. Not a rock shelf, not an old fence line, a wall, perfectly cut sandstone blocks, laid in a row that stretched 40 metres through dense scrub, pointing directly at a distant hilltop. He called the council. The council called a historian. The historian said it was probably a colonial boundary marker, but no survey record exists. No pastoral map accounts for it. No convict labour was ever recorded in that valley. The wall is still there today, buried beneath lantana and vine, and nobody official has ever gone back to look at it properly. That story is not unique. Around Brisbane, scattered through the Dagular Range, the Scenic Rim, the coastal hinterland, and the river valleys to the west, there are structures in the bush that do not fit neatly into any accepted timeline of Australian history. Stone arrangements too precise to be natural. Alignments that track the sun and moon with an accuracy that should not be possible by accident. Walls that predate the oldest colonial record by an unknowable margin. These structures are not the subject of major academic funding. They are known only to bushwalkers, local landowners, and a small number of researchers who have spent years trying to connect the dots. Today we are going into the bush around Brisbane to examine 10 of these structures. We will look at what is actually there, what researchers have proposed, what the official explanations say, and where those explanations fall short. Some of these sites exist only in handwritten field notes and word of mouth. If you have spent time in the Queensland bush and come across something you could not explain, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment. There are more of these sites than anyone in an official capacity is willing to admit. Hit subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Now let us go into the bush. Number 1. The Wedge walls of the Dagular Range. The Dagular Range rises directly behind Brisbane's northern suburbs, a long ridge of eucalypt forest and sandstone escarpment that most residents treat as a weekend hiking destination. But if you know where to walk, and more importantly where to look, the Dagular Range contains stone structures that have no satisfying colonial explanation. The most extensively documented of these are what local researchers call the Wedge walls. They appear at irregular intervals along the upper western escarpment, running roughly parallel to the ridgeline, before cutting sharply downhill at angles between 40 and 60 degrees. The stones are local sandstone, but they have been worked. The faces forming the interior angles are flat and consistent in a way that does not occur in natural sandstone fracture. A bushwalker named Adrian Hollis began photographing these walls in 2009 after stumbling across one during a solo traverse of the range. Over 8 years, he documented 11 separate wall sections across approximately 12 square kilometers. The sections are not continuous, separated by gaps of between 50 and 200 meters, as though the original structure was deliberately interrupted or has collapsed in sections and been buried. Hollis brought his findings to the Queensland Museum in 2014. He was told the walls were likely remnants of early pastoral boundary construction, possibly using convict labour. The problem is threefold. No convict assignment records place a labour gang in that valley during the relevant period. The stone cutting technique is inconsistent with documented colonial dry stone walling methods in Queensland, and most difficult to dismiss. Several wall sections run directly underneath living trees whose ring counts, assessed by a dendrochronologist Hollis brought to the site, suggest they are older than 180 years, predating European settlement of that country entirely. Nobody has funded a proper excavation. The wedge walls remain in the bush, slowly reclaimed by eucalypt forest above Brisbane. Number 2, the Bora ring complexes of the upper Brisbane Valley. Bora rings are known throughout southeastern Queensland. They are circular earthworks created by Aboriginal communities for initiation ceremonies, and they are among the most significant cultural sites in the region. The Queensland Heritage Register acknowledges dozens of them. They are not a mystery in themselves. What is less understood is a series of Bora ring sites in the upper Brisbane Valley associated with stone arrangements going far beyond the standard earthwork format. These rings incorporate precisely placed upright stones at specific compass points, with radiating stone lines extending outward in directions that align with solar and lunar events. The most complete of these complexes sits on private grazing land approximately 90 kilometres northwest of Brisbane. A drought in 2013 caused the grass cover to die back and expose the underlying arrangement. The landholder found a Bora ring, roughly 30 metres in diameter, surrounded by 8 upright stones at regular intervals, each standing between 40 and 70 centimetres above the ground. From 4 of those stones, lines of smaller flat stones extended outward for distances of up to 20 metres. A surveyor confirmed that 2 radiating stone lines point precisely to the sunrise on the winter solstice and summer solstice, respectively. A third line points to the most southerly moonrise position in the lunar standstill cycle, an astronomical event recurring once every 18.5 years. The local Aboriginal Land Council responded carefully. "The site is significant," they said. "It is old." Beyond that, they declined to share what they know, which is entirely their right. But the combination of earthwork, stone circle, and documented astronomical alignment at a single site is not something the heritage literature has ever adequately addressed. There are at least 3 similar complexes within 2 hours of Brisbane, and none appear on any public record. Number 3. The stone fish traps of Moreton Bay. At low tide on the eastern shore of Moreton Bay, particularly across the tidal flats south of Redcliffe and near Wellington Point, stone structures become visible beneath the shallow water that do not appear on any nautical chart as man-made features. They are dismissed, when noticed at all, as natural rock formations. They are not natural rock formations. Stone fish traps are one of the oldest forms of aquatic resource management known to archaeology. They appear in coastal regions across the Pacific, in Hawaii, in New Zealand, and in parts of indigenous Australia. They work by creating enclosures into which fish move with the incoming tide, and from which they cannot escape when the tide recedes. Building an effective stone fish trap requires intimate understanding of tidal flow, fish behaviour, and coastal bathymetry. The structures visible in Moreton Bay at low tide share all the characteristics of deliberate fish trap construction. They are formed from locally sourced basalt and sandstone cobbles, arranged in curved configurations that funnel tidal movement toward enclosed pockets. Several of them cover more than 2,000 square metres. The labour required to construct them would have been considerable. What makes them underexplained is the question of age. Sea level in Moreton Bay has changed significantly over the past several thousand years. The positions of some structures relative to current tidal patterns suggest they were built when the water level was lower, placing their construction at a minimum of 3,000 years ago and possibly considerably older. No formal archaeological dating has ever been conducted on the Moreton Bay stone structures. They sit in the water, and nobody officially responsible appears to be in any hurry. Number 4. The Lamington Plateau terraces. Lamington National Park is one of the most biologically diverse places in Australia. A World Heritage listed subtropical rainforest perched on the rim of an ancient shield volcano. Visitors come to see the Antarctic beech trees, the regent bowerbirds, and the curtain fig waterfalls. Very few walk far enough from the designated tracks to encounter what exists on the upper plateau. On the flat basalt surfaces of the Lamington Plateau, at elevations above 900 metres, there are stone terraces, not natural basalt formations, which tend toward irregular columnar jointing and angular collapse. These terraces are level, bounded by upright stone edges, and arranged in stepped sequences, descending the gentle slope of the plateau in a pattern consistent with agricultural terracing as documented in other parts of the world. The first written European record dates to a 1932 letter in the State Library of Queensland, written by a timber cutter named Reginald Foss, who described encountering what he called stone gardens on the high plateau while searching for timber tracks. Foss drew a rough sketch map. The positions he marked correspond with locations where these terrace features can still be found today. Agricultural terracing on a remote subtropical plateau at 900 metres raises obvious questions. The plateau has no permanent water source. The climate at that altitude is cooler than the surrounding valleys. What was being cultivated? By whom? For how long? These questions have not been answered, largely because they have not been formally asked. The terraces are within a national park, where research permit requirements have historically not been granted for this type of investigation. Number 5. The carved sandstone markers of Toohey Forest. Toohey Forest is a remnant bushland reserve in the southern suburbs of Brisbane, wedged between residential development on all sides. It is not the kind of place where you expect to find anything ancient. It is, by urban standards, a well-preserved fragment of the original Brisbane sandstone landscape. Within that forest, if you know the specific gully to enter and the specific sandstone shelf to find at the end of it, there is a series of carved outcrops representing one of the more quietly significant and thoroughly ignored sites in the entire metropolitan area. The carvings are not petroglyphs in the conventional sense. There are no figurative images, no animal forms, no human figures of the kind associated with the rock art sites of the Sydney Basin to the south. The sandstone faces have been worked with a pattern of straight lines, right-angle corners and regular cut marks laid out in a grid-like arrangement, covering approximately 8 square meters across 3 adjacent rock surfaces. A geologist who examined the site in 2018 confirmed the markings are not natural. The straight lines are inconsistent with any weathering or geological process. They were made by a tool applied repeatedly and with precision. The cut marks are ground into the surface rather than pecked, requiring sustained effort and a clear plan for the finished result. The site was reported to the Queensland Heritage Council. Their assessment concluded the markings were likely of Aboriginal origin, at which point the inquiry appears to have ended. No dating, no further documentation. A classification and a handover with no recorded follow-up. Number 6. The hilltop stone circles of the Scenic Rim. The Scenic Rim sweeps southwest from the Lamington Plateau, through the main range to the Mistake Mountains and beyond. Accessible from Brisbane in under 2 hours, it contains some of the most spectacular landscape in southeastern Queensland. It also contains, on a series of prominent hilltops along its northern face, stone circles that have no adequate official explanation. These are not Bora rings. They are not earthworks. They are arrangements of medium-sized basalt and granite stones, each weighing between 10 and 50 kilograms, placed on open hilltops in circular configurations, ranging from 4 meters to 18 meters in diameter. These hilltop arrangements have no association with earthwork construction. They are stones placed on exposed ridges with clear 360-degree views. The positioning of these sites is the detail that stops casual dismissal cold. They are intervisible. From each hilltop stone circle, you can see at least 2, and in some cases, 3 of the others. They form a chain of sightlines along the northern face of the Scenic Rim, stretching approximately 80 kilometers from one end to the other, peak to peak to peak. A signal network, a communication chain, a series of sites whose spatial relationship to each other mattered as much as what occurred at each individual location. Any of these interpretations fits the physical evidence equally well. None has been formally investigated. The stones sit on private and state land alike, weathering through each summer storm season, and the question of who placed them there has not moved closer to an answer in all the decades since researchers first noted their existence. Number 7. The Brisbane Valley cisterns. Moving west from the coastal ranges into the drier country of the Brisbane Valley, the landscape changes entirely. Dense eucalypt forest gives way to open ironbark woodland and grassy ridgelines, and the geology shifts from coastal sandstone to granite, schist and metamorphic rock, shaped by forces entirely different from the country near the bay. In this dry inland country, on properties spread across the mid-Brisbane Valley, stone-lined holes in the ground have been reported by landholders over many decades. They typically appear when someone drives a fence post and hits worked stone between half a metre and 1.5 meters down. When the surrounding material is excavated, what emerges is a circular chamber, stone lined with flat rocks, dry stacked to a consistent internal diameter of between 60 and 90 centimetres, open at the top and packed at the base with coarse gravel that acts as a filter and slow-release reservoir. Water collection structures, cisterns designed to gather and hold rainfall, in a landscape where surface water is seasonal and unreliable. What is surprising is the distribution. These features appear on different properties across an area that does not correspond to any known period of intensive colonial land use. The colonial record for this part of the Brisbane Valley is relatively complete. It does not account for systematic water harvesting infrastructure being present before European arrival. A grazier near Esk has 11 of these structures on her property alone. She found the first in 1994 and the most recent in 2021. She has never received a satisfying explanation from any official body she has contacted. She describes them simply as part of the country, things that were here before everything else. Number 8. The Redland Bay stone alignment. On the bayside coast southeast of Brisbane, Redland Bay sits at the edge of a tidal landscape, looking out across the southern reaches of Moreton Bay toward the long sand mass of North Stradbroke Island. It is a quiet part of the city's fringe, with mangrove-lined shores and tidal flats extending several hundred metres at low water. On those tidal flats, extending from a low rocky headland locals call the Point, there is a line of stones. A single line running approximately due east from the shore into the bay, composed of granite cobbles of roughly consistent size placed at intervals of between half a metre and 1 metre. The line extends for 97 measured metres before the water depth at low tide makes further observation difficult. A sea kayaker formally noticed it for the first time in the documentary record in 2007, photographed it, and posted the images to a bushwalking forum. The thread generated considerable discussion before going quiet. No official investigation followed. The alignment is oriented almost precisely on the autumn equinox sunrise. Stand at the landward end in the pre-dawn dark of the 21st of March, and the sun rises directly along the line of stones out into the bay. The same geometry applies in reverse for the spring equinox in September. This might be coincidence, but the probability that a 97-metre stone alignment accidentally points to equinox sunrise is not favourable to the coincidence explanation, and that interpretation has never been challenged in any published literature covering the region. The stones are still there, half submerged at every low tide, pointing east at the horizon where the equinox sun rises exactly above them. Number 9. The Glasshouse Mountains stone platforms. The Glasshouse Mountains are among the most recognisable landforms in Queensland. These ancient volcanic plugs rise from the flat coastal plain north of Brisbane in dramatic peaks that James Cook named when he sailed past them in 1770, saying they reminded him of the glass furnaces of his home county in Yorkshire. They are a major visitor destination, a climbing area, and sites of deep cultural significance to the Jinnaburra and Cubby Cubby peoples, whose country this has been since long before any European gave anything here a name. Around the bases of several peaks, particularly on the less visited western and southern approaches where tourist tracks do not go, there are stone platforms distinct from the natural basalt outcrops of the volcanic plugs. These platforms are flat. They are roughly rectangular. They are positioned at consistent elevations above the surrounding plain, as though built to provide a level standing surface with an unobstructed sightline toward a specific mountain peak. The platforms are not a secret to those who know the country. Local Aboriginal knowledge of them is long-standing. But the platforms as built structures, as deliberate constructions rather than natural features, have not entered mainstream archaeological literature in any meaningful way. A surveying student at Queensland University of Technology documented 6 of these platforms for an undergraduate thesis in 2016. Her measurements found that each platform faces a different glasshouse peak, and that the sightlines from platform to peak align with significant astronomical events across the full annual calendar. Her thesis received a passing grade. It appears to have been read by nobody in a position to act on what it found. The platforms remain where they were built, overlooking the volcanic spires that rise from the plain north of Brisbane. Number 10. The worked quartz of the Toohey Forest. The last structure on this list is the most difficult to verify, and, if the accounts are accurate, the most extraordinary in what it implies. It exists as a physical object reported by multiple independent witnesses across more than 30 years, and as marks on the ground surrounding it, suggesting it sits at the centre of a far larger arrangement. Somewhere in the deeper sections of Toohey National Park, in country that sees perhaps a dozen human visitors in an average year, there is reportedly a large quartz boulder worked on one face into a concave surface resembling a shallow lens. A concave face on a quartz boulder in direct sunlight concentrates light at a focal point directly in front of the stone. Around this boulder, according to 3 independent bushwalkers and 1 professional orienteer who documented their separate encounters, the ground carries a radiating pattern of stone lines, similar to the astronomical alignments described earlier, but more complex. There are 7 lines radiating outward in directions that no accidental arrangement of stones would produce. The orienteer recorded compass bearings and estimated the 7 lines point to 7 distinct peaks visible on the horizon. He published an account in a small circulation bushwalking newsletter in 2009, then returned to find the site and could not locate it in the same section of forest where he had stood before. A worked quartz boulder at the center of a 7-point stone arrangement in a national park 40 minutes from the Brisbane CBD, seen by multiple people, documented by one, and currently impossible to relocate with certainty. The bush around Brisbane does not give up its mysteries easily. These 10 sites are 10 points in what appears to be a much larger pattern of deliberate landscape modification across southeastern Queensland, extending back through time well beyond the accepted account of this country's human history. The questions they raise are not small or obvious ones. Taken together, they suggest the land around Brisbane was shaped by human activity over a far longer time frame and with a far greater degree of sophistication than the standard version of events allows. Each of these sites deserves formal investigation. Each represents a question that Australian archaeology has not yet decided it needs to answer. Whether that changes depends in part on how many people are paying attention. If this video made you look at the bush differently, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who spends time out there. Leave a comment below if you have found something out there you could not explain. There are people watching this channel who want to hear about it. We will see you in the next one.